Before we begin, I would also like to add a trigger warning for anyone who is sensitive to certain topics. Please take care when you're watching this video. Pause it, take a breath if you need to, or we will add timestamps so that you can skip around and skip over the parts that you may not be comfortable hearing or watching.
My dad is he's been known to be very, very abusive. The way I imagine it is he just goes black, like he just sees black. Mm-hmm. And if he gets to a point where he's just mad, there's been like kind of jokes or like comments. If you're in the line of fire, you may not wake up tomorrow. And that's just what's to be expected. Being locked in a basement, zip tied to the boards and the studs, I'd rather that than be like within earshot. So every time they get mad, then they just...
Hey, my name is Shelise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening and you want to see our faces, you can go to my YouTube channel at Cults to Consciousness, where you can join in on the conversation, leave those words of encouragement for our guests. They read the comments. It really means a lot to them, means a lot to us. It helps the algorithm. So we also have something really exciting, some exciting news. Stay tuned to the end to hear about our first ever C2C vacation. So it's going to be really fun. Okay, so today's guest, you guys actually requested her. Guys, I'm always open to guest suggestions. Leave them in the comments if you have them. We are continuing on with the order. So she is actually related to Val, Chanel, and Amanda Ray. And so we're going to be getting another perspective, another glimpse inside the fundamentalist polygamous Mormon sect known as the Order or the Kingston Clan. These are the people who are most known for incestuous polygamy. In fact, her dad had 16 wives, and we're going to get into how he was related to all of them and where she falls within that lineup. We definitely have a lot to cover, so we've decided this is going to be a two-part episode. In this first episode, we're going to discuss her childhood, all of the dangerous things that came along with being a part of the order, including the treatment from her father, who did have over 200 children, and the things that he would do in order to keep them quiet, to keep them in line. In the next episode, we are going to be going into more about her escape. She was featured on Escaping Polygamy, and her story was shown there, but we're going to see more details behind the scenes of what it was like actually leaving and being cut off from her family. So stay tuned for that. Without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Michelle Michaels.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. And you were actually featured on Escaping Polygamy. What was that like filming that show?
It was different, I guess. So in my family specifically, we didn't watch a whole lot of TV. I know that's a little bit different from some of the others, but so then going on to a TV show, I kind of didn't know what to expect. Mm-hmm. Like I would talk about a story in my life and they would say, oh, that's too much to be put on TV, because it was too traumatic. So there were like those points, but it was just different, I guess.
Yeah, well, here on C2C, we are famous for airing the details that are too dark for television, so stay tuned, guys. We will be talking about some triggering things, and we always put trigger warnings in the beginning and write them on the screen. We can't say them out loud because YouTube tends to restrict our videos if we do so, and we want to get as much reach as possible. So always make sure to check the caption and or the description for chapter marks as well, so you can avoid any triggers that may be difficult to see or listen to. So your story specifically, let's talk about your family dynamic. Tell us a little bit about who your dad's wives were.
So my dad's first wife is his half-sister. And actually, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this to other people.
It's okay.
So it's his half-sister and actually Amanda's dad's full sister.
Okay.
And then his second wife is a cousin. And then his third wife is his first wife's full sister. So again, his half-sister. Then his fourth wife is another half-sister from a different half-mom, I guess. Then fifth is a half-sister, sister to the first and third wife. And the sixth wife is my mom. She's his niece. Then it just goes down the line. Nieces, cousins.
Oh my goodness. I am trying to figure out what is worse, marrying your uncle or marrying your brother, because they're both very like, ooh, doesn't feel great. It's a little squeamish. I don't know, because at least with your brother, they might be closer in age versus marrying an uncle. Do you know the age difference between your mom and your dad?
7 years.
Okay, that's not too bad. That's not too bad at all. I was expecting like 12 or 13, which is still like in normal life, I get it. It's fine. But when it's your uncle, it just feels different.
Yeah. So we were actually raised, I was told, plan on your husband being 7 years older than you. Like that's just what to expect. And if they're closer in age, then you're lucky.
Interesting.
So that was like the trend. And I know I have a half brother. He was like, I think he was 30 when his wife was born.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are significant age gaps. 7 years is actually really decent, but that's, would you say that that's the normal, or the 30-year age gap is a little bit more of an exception?
I feel like the 30-year age gap is more of an exception. It's typically about 7, or they've been trying to do less because of all the things in the news.
Right.
If they can get away with it, then they do less. I wouldn't say the 30-year age gap is necessarily abnormal, because there's not like one-offs, two-offs. There's like multiple that are like that. But we just have it all.
Okay, so to add a little bit more context to this, for those who aren't familiar with the order or Mormonism in general, the normal, like the mainstream Mormons are not practicing polygamy. At least they're not supposed to be, because it was outlawed a while back by the government. But what happened is a lot of people said, no, Joseph Smith and the early prophets taught us that this is the only way to get to the highest level of heaven, because there are levels. So we need to continue this practice. And that's when they kind of branched off into their own groups. So within your group specifically, they think that they need to keep the bloodline pure because they believe they're descended from Jesus, right?
Yes. So that's one thing that in our group, the men, they have these priesthood classes, and they actually have to memorize the lineage from Adam. Not just Jesus, but Adam.
Wait.
In order to get the priesthood, you have to go off and
I would love to see one of those documents, because I've never seen anyone even attempt to draw back the lineage to Adam. That seems impossible. So if you can get your hand on one of those, put it up on the screen if we can get it.
And that's one thing about me. When I left, I took all my documents. I was just gathering, and I have a couple of the priesthood books in the handbooks, and we found some pretty weird things in there. But yeah, so, and then for the females, in order for your husband to be, I guess, qualified, then you also had to have, I don't know if it was, you had to know back to Adam or if it was back to Jesus, but it was one of the two. And so like there was, when I first left, I could go back some ways, but not back to Adam.
That seems impossible. I thought, and maybe this is me being naive and who knows, but I thought Jesus didn't have any children. So how do you go back to Jesus?
Well, you make things up.
There you have it, folks. It's made up.
Well, that's when I was like looking at it, because my brothers were trying to get the priesthood, and I was looking at it and I'm like, this isn't connecting.
Yeah.
And because that was my relationship with my siblings, we would just like say those things, and then we would like, they would talk to my mom. They're like, well, in the Bible, then it doesn't, like that doesn't match. And my mom's like, just memorize it, just get the priesthood, just make dad happy.
Interesting. Because there's, to me as an outsider, there is a lot on the line as far as why you would want to marry your half sister or feel the need to. And the whole point is to keep the bloodline pure because you're descended from Jesus. But if that's not true, then everything kind of falls apart.
So along with that, I don't know if anyone has talked about it on your channel, So they're all about like the Kingstons, right? Like Chanel had mentioned, oh, I'm Hanson, so I'm looked down on. My dad's family was one of the ones who were very, how do I say this? We were very
Elite?
mean to people. Well, we felt like we were elite and we like looked down on like the Hansons. Because some of the other, like Paul's kids, they can be like nicer, but my dad's family has a reputation that we're very stuck up.
Okay.
We're actually not Kingstons. Back in the day when the Kingston line started, I guess, the wife was pregnant and then she got married to the Kingston. And we're descendants of that pregnancy that she was already pregnant with. So our real last name is Bull.
Oh.
If that makes any sense. So Kingston is a married last name that we take so much pride in. Kingston means like royal. Kingston means purple, all the things. And I don't know, I joke. We're really bulls because it's all a bunch of bullshit. But Bull is actually the name.
Oh, wow. Okay, so even just going back 1 or 2 generations, there's already a flaw in the family tree that's supposed to lead to Jesus.
Yes. And that's what, like, there's so many Kingstons in the order that are like, I'm Kingston, I'm pure. None of us are Kingston in our blood.
Okay.
So when I say, like, it's made up, it's just one of the things that the story got told and lost in translation, I guess.
So interesting. So just so everyone's aware, if they haven't seen previous videos on the order, what are some of the rules that you had to live by as a kid and growing up?
So we had the ABC order standards. They were like, A is for appreciation. Lack of appreciation is a major crime. B, like, I don't even have them memorized, but they were very like broken down, but also complex at the same time. There's one that's about your membership in the order. My membership in the order is like a hunting license. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it gives you the right to hunt and seek for eternal life. That's like, I don't know, I would say one of the basics.
Interesting.
And they would say it's the only place that you can live all of God's laws. We had to never talk back, never question the one above. One thing they would say is the one above you is innocent in everything they do. If you don't understand it, then it's because God hasn't given you the ability to understand it. It's not because they're doing something wrong. It's because you are below them and you just don't understand.
That is dangerous.
So that was like the basic rule that I would say that we had to follow.
Okay.
The order has like a very specific set of rules, but then when it varies from different families, then they were more lenient on things. Mm-hmm. Like my dad was he's all about his image. So if you like harm his image, he's coming after you. When it came to like watching TV, there were different things. Like Amanda, she would say like she wasn't allowed to watch like The Lion King because he's turning his back on his brother, or Little Mermaid because she disobeys her dad. And that was like some of the more lenient families. But then in my family, then they were like, watching TV is a waste of time. You could be working 3 jobs at the same time if you're not wasting time watching TV and books. Then my mom would say we had to ask her and my dad if we could read like Harry Potter. I know it was brought up.
Yeah.
But just really any book, then they would say, well, have you read all the scriptures? Have you read the Bible through and through? And I feel like, I don't know, my dad was very picky on things. Like when you read the Bible, you can't say you've read the Bible if you've listened to it. You have to read it yourself. You have to read all the footnotes. Is that what they're called in the Bible?
Yeah.
Yeah, so all the footnotes, and you have to like, when you get to the bottom of the page, you have to go read the footnotes and then go back and look to what it's talking about and then come back to this page and then you're done reading that page.
Yeah, so everything seems to be focused on the order specifically, giving all of your money to the order, working as soon as you can for the order, not having really any possessions of your own. And as Amanda put it, living the law of consecration. So just giving everything to the church, which in turn creates a lot of problems when you have these men who have over 200 children. They're not really providing for them, yet the children are providing for the husband. It's almost backwards because they make the children start working so young and give all the money to the dad, but the dad doesn't turn around and provide for the kids. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. So I know Val mentioned, like, if you found a penny, even if you wanted to go spend that penny right then, you had to go turn it in. So I don't know, like, if that makes sense, but like turning it in. I still call it that when I go to the bank. Like, I need to turn this check in. I need to, but I guess it's called deposit. So you need to go deposit the penny so that they could get their 10% of that penny.
Oh my gosh.
That's how instilled it was. But when it came to like working, that was a big thing after I left. Everyone always says, what was the biggest shock when you left? What was the biggest shock? There were a lot of shocks for me. A big thing was they don't bring their kids to work with them. They don't like put them under the desk or put them in a box next to your desk and have them just like be.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, I have to go through daycare if I have kids. Because my mom, she had a baby and she was at work the next day with that baby laying on a chair on a pillow. So like literally the next day.
That sounds awful.
Yes. Not after having kids.
Right. You've had children now, so you can understand how absolutely bonkers that is.
Yes. In terms of the kids supporting the dad, my dad really likes Star Wars. He really likes toys. He would say, like, you have to hold it a certain way so that you didn't get fingerprints on it, on the box, or you would have to go return them. And there were times that I paid for those toys and then I gave them to my dad.
What?
I guess one of the wives, one time she bought something for my dad and then she told my mom, I just bought that for Jesse. Can you pay me back? Because I don't have the money to buy that for him. And my mom was like, in the past she had done it. But then I had like gotten upset at her. I'm like, you're in debt. You can't provide for us.
Yeah.
She's just as much as one of his wives. And so my mom ended up telling that wife, either you can ask him for the money or just tell yourself that was a birthday present for him.
Yeah.
And I would actually get paid to go buy him toys, but the money was coming out of my pocket a lot of the time. So I'm like, was I getting paid? Was I getting gypped? I guess they thought that it made up for it.
So you are literally, as a child, buying toys for your dad.
Yes.
I'm trying to wrap my brain around this because it is so completely backwards and just crazy to me that would be your responsibility.
And we didn't have toys. You know, we had the miscellaneous toys that we got from the DI, but those just stayed in the cupboard. We didn't like play with those toys. Like my mom's younger kids, they did more than we did, but I started work when I was 4 and I had my schedule. And even after work, like the work hours, then I would come home and I would start doing a second job and a third job, even if it was like adding up numbers for the statements and different things. Like I didn't really play. So then, and my dad doesn't even, he would tell me, you're one of my privileged kids that I allow to not only know that I have toys, but touch my toys. So like some of his wives aren't aware of how much toys he has, but he could support some families with those toys.
Wow. Okay, let's go back a little bit. Your first job was at 4 years old.
Yeah.
I can't even comprehend. What is a 4-year-old even capable of doing? What jobs are they giving to 4-year-olds?
So we were like washing walls, sweeping floors, doing like a lot of janitorial work, cleaning bathrooms, dumping garbages. So that was another thing. Like when you take your kids to work, they're a kid and they're sleeping in a box next to your desk. But once they're old enough to do something, then you have them stapling papers, filing papers, putting hole punches in them, put them in the payroll book. And some of my younger siblings, they started younger than 4.
What?
My dad would tell me and tell my mom, and I would overhear. They would say, well, you need to have Michelle do this or one of the kids do this. And they would have us shred papers because we couldn't read what was on them.
Okay. So you're doing janitorial work at 4. And I think you mentioned off camera, your next job at 7 was a desk job.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you doing at 7 years old that an adult would trust you to do?
I was actually working at the bank at 7 years old.
Hold on. Oh my gosh.
That was my desk job.
This is blowing my mind, Michelle. Okay, what were you doing at the bank at 7 years old?
The banking system is a little bit different. So we have statements. I would help with the statements when it was that time of month, like the end of the month, we would do statements. But during the month, then we would have these, we call them service slips. They're like the transactions from one order member to another order member, or an order member to the grocery store. And we were entering those into the computer. That's what I was doing at 7.
Okay.
So if you would trust a 7-year-old to manage your bank account, my daughter will be 7 here soon.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that now?
Well, I told my daughter, because I was explaining money to her, and I told her, I said, well, if you want money, she's like, well, I'll just use your card. And I said, well, in order to put money on that card, you need to work. And she told me that if she has to go to work, she will run away. So the apple doesn't fall far.
So I know we wanted to talk about your job at the bank when you got a little bit older and you were in charge of either putting through or denying requests for people to pull their own money out. So let's talk about that.
It seems like I never really lost jobs or switched jobs. I just had an additional job. So the only time that I had, like that I progressed out of a job was out of the janitorial work because they had the younger kids ready to take on that work. So I worked at the bank. Then I started working with my mom and my dad at the computer business where they made all the programs that the order uses, like at the bank. They wrote that program at my dad's business. Whoa. So they don't need any outside help from anybody. And then I remember it was the day after Christmas and nobody wanted to work. So with Cardline, Val and Chanel and different ones talked about this. But anytime you want to buy anything, it has to be approved by Cardline. So the day after Christmas, nobody really wanted to work. So they said, well, Michelle's ready. She was getting ready to be trained. Let's have her work tomorrow. So I just kind of got thrown into this job of answering Cardline the day after Christmas. And the hours were 8 to 8, Monday through Saturday, and Sunday 1 to 5. That was the schedule. So we had to have somebody there denying all the moms money for groceries. But yeah, so I was on the other side. I remember we'd answer and we'd say card number. They'd give us our card number. We'd ask what it's for. And then if there's not money on that card, then we'd decline it. And there was nothing like I could do. I just said, nope, you can't have it. Then if you wanted to get an add-on, so like if I told you that you had no money on your card, you had to go get an add-on from one of Paul's wives.
Paul is the leader.
Yes. And there's another girl that works there trying to see how she's related. She's a cousin to Paul, I believe. And they could add on money to your card line, but their hours were not the same hours as mine. So like if you didn't get an add-on by the time like 5 o'clock on Friday, you weren't getting groceries that weekend. And there's nothing I could do. I was just, nope, it's declined. You have all those groceries ready at the store, all bagged up, put them back. There were people who would tell me like, I have to, and even tell my mom, I need to pay for my husband's phone bill, so I can't have my phone turned on this month. And I had to skip getting like cheese this week. There were some moms that a slice of cheese was your reward for doing your chores for a week. Was a slice of cheese.
How is this making you feel as a teenager, having to deny these grown women, or maybe some of them were closer to your age because you get married so young, but how is that making you feel being the one to have to say no to someone to feed their family?
I didn't think a whole lot of it at first because I didn't really understand the concept.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was this kid, I was kind of thrown into it with little training. And they said, just read what the screen says. Just read what the screen says. So I did. But then I would go to like these dances that the order has that you're like kind of like quick dating. But you go to these dances and they're like, oh, where do you work? And I'm like, oh, I work at Cardline. And then there were people who would make comments like, so you're the one denying me groceries and you're the one. And I was like, that's what I'm doing. At that point, I was kind of like, I'm not like doing it to be mean. Like, I'm not picking favorites, you know. I don't have any ability to give you more money. That's not my call. All I can do is tell you what has been pre-approved by the leadership and these different people who are in place. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of like the people saying no. We were kind of shielding the leadership, I guess, a little bit. So they would take it out on us and we would get screamed at all the time. And like there were calls coming in constantly of, I need money, I need groceries. Like, what am I supposed to do? I have kids to feed. And I would tell them like, I'm sorry, I can't do anything.
Right. And also to add more context, most of these mothers are having up to 12 children or more. Mm-hmm. So this is not just one or two kids they need to feed. It is a ton of kids. And all of their money, as we mentioned, that they worked for goes to their husband, and then they are allotted an approved amount. Mm-hmm. And sometimes not allotted anything. And in previous episodes, we mentioned families are forced to dumpster dive or get produce or food that is expired or about to expire. Did you want to talk about that?
Mm-hmm. This is another thing. Like, I say things at random points outside after the order, and then I don't realize it's weird until people like kind of give me a look. But like my 3-course meal, my 5-course meal that I was in my head was going to Little Caesars at the end of the night, dumpster diving there for our main course. And if there was like someone bit off of it, if you were hungry, you just ate it. Sometimes we would rip off like where they bit, but obviously germs didn't exist. But then we would go to Burger King and we would get French fries out of their dumpster. So then that was another meal. And then we would go across the street to Krispy Kreme's. And that was a grand meal that we had. That was what our like being spoiled was going to 3 different dumpsters in one night.
And this was your normal to you as a child.
Yeah. And that was even after I left, I would tell people like, now that I have to buy groceries, like groceries are so expensive. And I was like shocked because I was getting all these things for free out of the dumpster. Right. I would tell them, I'm like, you know, we could save money by just going in the garbage can. And they're like, don't do that.
Yeah, you're having to learn a whole new way of life because this was your normal. And so it does take that breaking of, I mean, I call it taking the goggles off when you are outside of the cult and you're like, wait, that wasn't normal. And that's how I find out things are weird too, is when I'm telling a story and then all of a sudden their face goes, what? And I go, oh, right. Let me explain that to you because that's just part of my life. And my life was nowhere near as extreme as yours because obviously you were living the fundamentalist version of Mormonism. I was in the mainstream Mormon religion. So I can only imagine what that's been like for you acclimating. And I do want to get more into that when you leave. But first, I want to get a little bit more into your childhood because...
Sorry, I will say...
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
It kind of made me feel like I had a lack of empathy for a while after I left, because to me, I was like, these people just don't appreciate the food in the garbage. So I was just like, kind of like this alien to other people. And I was at work and we had come back from break it had been about an hour after break. And this person said, I'm hungry. And I said, well, did you eat on break? And they said, yeah, but I'm hungry. I'm hungry again. And There's times I don't realize what I should not say. But I told them, I'm like, okay, so wait till lunch. And they were like, I know, but I'm just expressing that I'm hungry. And I even told them, I said, it's been an hour. Try going 3 days, being locked up in a basement, and you don't have food. And they were like, I don't think you're supposed to say that.
Oh, no.
And they told me that, and I was like, oh, okay. I mean, that was a little harsh, but it's reality. Like, but did I lie?
Right. And they probably, well, I don't know each situation, but it's my assumption that they would that they would think that you didn't actually live that you were just like, one of the expressions that people always say, like, well, what about the starving children in Africa or whatever, which is still not appropriate. But they probably didn't realize that that was actually a reality.
There's been times that they didn't, but I have this really big thing about spreading awareness. Like, if I stay quiet about my upbringing, then people don't know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. How are they going to know unless someone is open about sharing their experience? Because there's always like, oh yeah, there's children in Africa, like you said. But unless there's somebody who came from Africa and says, this is what it's like to be starved there, then you don't really understand the extreme.
Exactly.
So I've always been like an advocate of, let me share what I can, because that's the only way to have things stopped or fixed.
Yeah.
So there were both situations. And there were times that I would say, like, okay, try not eating for 3 days and your first meal is drinking olive oil. And they were like, okay, I won't complain. But it's not that they can't complain. It's that connection that I'm trying to have with people, like being normal, I guess.
Yeah. Wow, that must have been so difficult. Do you want to talk about those experiences at all and the treatment that you went through as a child?
Yeah, so my dad is he's been known to be very, very abusive. The way I imagine it is he just goes black, like he just sees black. Mm-hmm. And if he gets to a point where he's just mad and you are there or in the line of fire or whatever it is, there's been like kind of jokes or like comments. If you're in the line of fire, you may not wake up tomorrow. And that's just what's to be expected. Because like even when I was a baby, before I even turned 1, it's been said that my dad has beat a baby to death. And my mom went to jail for that because it was her house and they told her, it's either you go to jail and he goes to jail because you married your uncle, or you can take the fall and basically let him off the hook. So she took the blame. Wow. And then after that, then my mom, for a long time, my mom didn't want to hit us. And she would just say like, she would kind of use it as a threat, but she wouldn't go all the way. But after that, then I was told that Paul actually had a talk with my dad and said, basically, you're not allowed to give out beatings because your anger, you don't have it under control. So you need to let someone else do it. So there was a long time that he didn't hit us himself, but he would have like the moms do it or somebody else do it and then report back and say, this is what happened. Sometimes record the beatings and show them to him. And then he would say, that's not good enough. Go back and do it some more. But my very first memory of my dad was him beating me because I sneezed during family prayer and he thought I laughed. And there was no explaining, no nothing. It was just, that's not allowed. And at that point, I didn't even know he was my dad. He was just this man beating me.
Do you know how old you were when that happened?
I was 3 or 4 because I was not in school yet.
Oh.
So like that was my very first memory of knowing who this man was. But as I got older, then there was this situation. I don't know. I know it's been explained, like the dances.
You can explain it again.
It's basically like dating. I don't know what it's called on the outside. Like fast dating.
Oh, speed dating.
Speed dating, sorry. Yeah, so it's kind of like that where you dance with these people. So like in my dad's family, we had a rule. The girls have to sit on the front row, and you can't say no to a man unless you ask your dad for permission. So we were at a dance, and my sister, it was time to leave. We said bye to my dad. We went and got in the car, and then one of the kids, having 10 plus kids, you're going to lose one of them. So one of the kids didn't make it to the car. So my mom sent my older sister back in to find the other kid. And while she was in there, she got asked to dance. And we can't say no. So she danced with them. And my dad drug her outside to the car after the song was over, and just was hitting her for hours and hours and hours. That sounds like I'm exaggerating, but I remember watching the clock. We were outside around 9:30, ready to leave. My sister went back inside. We were there till 1 a.m. And my dad was just hitting my sister over and over and over. And he told my mom, and I remember like crying. I was like, just please stop, please stop. And I was this little kid.
Yeah.
And he told my mom, this is what happens when you don't beat your kids. If you don't do it, then I will. So then my mom was like, well, I can hit him every now and then, or I can have Jesse hit him, and he's going to beat the shit out of them.
Yeah.
So she kind of said, well, I would rather do it than have him do it.
Right.
So then we would just and there were times that like he would tell my mom, like he was never there, but he would tell my mom, I got direction from the Lord. I don't know exactly if he would phrase it that way, but basically this kid needs to be beat.
Just out of nowhere.
So go home and beat them, report back. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because there were times that, like, I know my younger brother, he would talk to my dad, and my dad really had an issue with, I can't think, like, the octave of his voice. So he has a very deep voice, obviously, like guys do. But my dad would say, like, he never seems happy to talk to him. So my mom had to beat him because he talked to my dad in his normal voice. It didn't matter, like, what it was. It was for the stupidest things. Or it can be literally anything. I was told that I walk wrong and my voice is too deep for a girl. It's not acceptable. There were times that I got beat for that. There were times that I got beat because my smile is wrong. So it was literally like, you're wearing this instead of this, you're going to get a beating. And you just have to accept it. That's just the way of life.
Oh my gosh. And I also want to point out that the leader, the prophet, knew that this was happening and not only didn't stop it, but encouraged it and said, well, if you don't do it, someone else should. And I just wanted to point that out because I know a lot of people may be thinking that it has nothing to do with the group, but it clearly is enforced and okay and encouraged within the group as a form of punishment or as an excuse. They're using God as an excuse.
What does it say in the Bible? Like,
spoil the child, spare the rod, spoil the child. That one?
Yeah. Yeah. Spare the rod, spoil the child. They've always said that. And they would say, like, basically what I got from it was, if your kids aren't scared of you, how do you expect them to listen to you? Because, like, they're obviously not building that relationship. So how else are they going to do what you say unless there's, like, incentive, basically? Mm-hmm. And that's how I always took it. Like, this is, like, some random man who's coming to my mom's house every other Thursday. Who is he? Like, why do I have to listen to him? Mm-hmm. But if there's going to be a beating on the line, then, yeah, I'm going to jump up. And if he wants me to do it with a smile, if he wants me to jump up and down 5 times and spin around before I get him a cup of water, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that in a split second. And that was, like, a lot of what my dad's role was do it, jump up and do it. Don't just do it. Don't just do it with a smile. Jump up and do it before he even has to ask. You better be on your way and even have done it before he even thinks about it. That's the type That's the way you can show that you respect your father.
It's just so over the top and sadistic in the things that he would do, not only just the physical abuse, but like you mentioned earlier, locking you in a basement.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is he hoping to gain from that?
Well, and that was a form of punishment. So the basement was, in my eyes, it wasn't the worst. Because, like, being locked in a basement, zip tied to the boards and the studs, I'd rather that than be, like, within earshot. So every time they get mad, then they just, hit me. I would way rather be locked in a cold basement, like I said, zip tied to the boards, maybe they forgot about me, maybe they didn't. But there were other situations that there were all types of abuse, like public humiliation. They had one of my half-sisters, they had her wear a bag around her, like a diaper, because she would have seizures. And her having those seizures and peeing her pants on occasion when she would have those seizures, then she was doing that for attention. That was a big thing with my dad, was everything was for attention. I would walk wrong because I wanted attention. I would smile wrong because when someone takes a picture of our family, I want them to look at me and see that I am ruining the picture.
Oh.
So it was always for attention. So that was the way to say, you want attention? We'll give you attention, but we're going to hurt you physically, psychologically, emotionally. Because there were times that this same half-sister, she was put into a garbage can outside.
What?
And I hate to say it, but I was forced to take part in that abuse. I would walk her out to the garbage can and she would get in, and then we were told to put boxes and boxes on top of this garbage can so she couldn't get out. And there were times that we put the garbage can in the garage so that she couldn't get out. And it was just different things. A lot of Daniel's abuse is out there. So when I talk to different ones like Amanda, they're like, Jesse's way worse than Daniel ever was. But none of Jesse's kids are talking about it because they're shamed. They're shamed like we're all shamed that the reason why that happened to you is because you deserved it. But not only that, but Jesse, like my dad, he would say, if you're going to tell somebody that I abused you, how stupid is that going to sound? That you took time out of my family so that you can be abused. So they're just going to think you're even like 3 times as stupid. And that same half-sister, there was a point that her entire top of her hand was burned. And you could see like parts of her bone because of how bad it was burned. It was held under hot water for maybe a minute, maybe longer. But it was like so bad. And they sprayed what they call mineral water on it. They didn't take her to the doctor. They didn't do anything. They just sprayed this mineral water on it. But how they get this mineral water, it's like a brown water. So I think they leave it in like a dusty barrel. I don't think it's actual mineral water. Like I said, it's brown when we get it. And they say like you have to put it in glass jars because it'll eat through the bottle. And they were spraying this on burns.
Oh.
But that's how they like treated her hand. She might even still have a scar. But I know that half-sister, she took a lot of abuse. And because she had seizures, there was even a point in time where they talked about, and they even went to different doctors to try to find a doctor who would cut into her brain. And because they prayed about it, and I don't know if this is actual, like legit, or if they just prayed about it and found this procedure, but they were going to cut part of her brain and sew it so that she couldn't physically have a seizure.
Oh my gosh.
So I don't know what procedure this was. I know that they did go to the hospital. They found a hospital that would do whatever procedure they were asking, and she had to shave her head, and she had a cut from the back of her neck all the way to the top of her head. So they did some type of procedure, and they would tell us, like, if you roll your eyes, we're going to go take you to a doctor, and we're going to have them sew your eyelid so that you can't turn your eye that way.
Oh my gosh.
So, like, a lot of the other families, they would threat, like, a beating or a slap or a spanking, whatever you want to call it. But for us, then those were the threats. I'm going to take you into the doctor, and the doctor's going to surgically fix you so you can't insult me that way. So that is Jesse.
That is a lot, Michelle. I'm so sorry that you had to deal with that and grow up with that and endure all of that. Honestly, it's just, it's too much for anyone to handle. And to think that he has over 200 children, do you think that every family was getting this same type of treatment?
I think some were getting it more than others. I've been told, like, since I've left, then there's been people who are like, well, Dad never treated me like that. And I'm happy for those people. Like, yeah, this wasn't fun. Like, I'm not like, all of them should be getting this treatment. I'm not hateful like that. I'm not vengeful. If Dad treated you nicely, that is amazing. I'm so happy that you had a better relationship than I did.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't discount my abuse.
Of course.
So I know, like, some of this abuse that I've talked about, like, I didn't have the burn on my hand. I didn't get, like, thrown in a dumpster and those different things. So some of them were better than others, but also, I hate to say it, some of them were worse than all of these things I've said. And I know that for a fact. And there's, like, a lot of these things I haven't talked about because, I don't know, they're traumatic, I guess.
Yeah, of
and,
course.
Like, that girl who was, that half-sister who was treated so horribly. And I wanted to talk about it and share what happened, but she's still in the order. She's a plural wife with kids. So I'm like, how do I share somebody else's story, but also I took part in the abuse. Like, I was one of her, like, abusers. Like, I was one of the physical abusers against her. So how do I share that? But also, like, understand that I'm not trying to hide it. That's not why I'm not sharing it. But that's not really my story to tell. Yeah. But I feel horrible about those things that I helped participate in. So it's kind of been hard to find this balance of what do I share? What do I not share? Like, I endured a lot of this abuse too. Yeah. But, like, the worst case scenarios, I would consider myself lucky for the abuse that I endured personally at the hands of the people who were capable of all these other things.
I just have to say that I understand that accountability is good, and of course it's a good positive step. However, I also want to pair that with you were also being abused, you were also being manipulated, and I know that you know this. I just want to say it out loud, and also for everyone who's listening who may be experiencing something similar, that you were completely controlled and you didn't have a choice. And so I hope that you don't hold too much guilt over that, because there was really nothing else that you could have done.
Well, and what they said, when my brother beat me 50 plus times with the board, and he was told, keep going. I don't care if she dies. Keep going. She needs it more. And he even told me that, like, I don't want to do this, but you know it's better me than Dad, because if Dad has to get woken up and Dad has to come here, he won't stop. And that's even what my mom told my brother. It's either you, because he's like, I don't want to beat my sister. She's like 3 years younger than me, 4 years younger than me. And my mom said, it's either you or Dad, because I'm pregnant. I can't lose this baby, or I'm going to be abused. So it's either you or Dad, and we know Dad won't stop, because he's, like, capable of killing an 18-month-old baby. What is he going to do to this 16, 17, 12-year-old? Doesn't matter what age. If he can kill an 18-month-old baby that the surgical staff and the surgeon say they beat the shit out of this girl, what is he going to do to us? So I understand that part, but it is hard for me to like I said, find that balance of what do I share? Because I don't want them to think that I'm shying away like, oh, I was perfect. But also I was the bad one in their story. Rightfully so.
Wow. That just sounds so terrifying. Is there anything else that you wanted to share on this topic before I move us in a different direction?
People don't know about Jesse's abuse because a lot of his kids didn't leave. His kids would stay in the order because, again, like, what are you going to go tell people? That you were so stupid you needed to be beat when you were an adult? That's what I was told. Like, you're going to go tell people that you needed to be beat when you were 15, 16, 17? They're just going to look at you as the idiot. Because why did you not learn? Because another thing with my dad was, by the time a child is 2, they should be able to sit through church, which is like 4 hours, I think, without getting up to go to the bathroom, without making a noise, without even getting off their chair by the time they're 2. And if they don't know that, then that means you didn't beat them enough.
Oh.
That is what my dad has said in multiple family meetings, multiple daughters, sons meetings. So that's his rule. That's what he lives by. So someone is not too little or too old to ever be beat.
Yeah.
And I've seen that myself. My little sister, she was crying on the way home, and my dad happened to be in the car, and she couldn't even sit up. And he took her out of her car seat, and he beat her.
Oof.
It was just the way of life, but nobody has really talked about it. And they're like, oh, Daniel, which Daniel has been horrible. He's done some horrible things. I'm not trying to discount that. But Daniel's kids are also a lot more vocal. So it's more, I guess, more of a light has been shined on it. But like with Jesse's kids, I'm the first one of Jesse's kids to leave on their own. My dad's second wife left and took her 6 kids, but I was the first one to leave on their own. So I feel like a little bit of a responsibility to be the voice that like has shown so much of a light, for example, in Daniel's family, because so many people spoke up. And I'm like, well, that's all on my shoulders to raise this awareness that Jesse's not all what his image portrays, I guess.
Yeah. One of our commenters frequently comments on our videos, break the silence, break the cycle. And I think that's what you're doing is you are being extremely brave, stepping out, talking about the truth. And that's actually what the commenter said who wanted you on. They were like, gotta get Michelle. She doesn't sugarcoat anything. She just tells it like it is. And I was like, let's get her on the phone. Let's talk about it because it's difficult. And like you said, I am sure that comes with a lot of shame, even though it's not necessarily warranted how you feel ashamed for being a part of this. But I'm sure it's so difficult to be able to admit some of these things and to bring it out into the open. It's a lot. And so I just, even in this moment, want to pause and say, guys, if you're watching this, leave those words of encouragement for Michelle in the comments because this is really difficult to do. And I really want to connect the viewers with this real human being, Michelle, right here in front of us, telling her actual story. This is not just some random TV show. These are real people. These are their lives. And so coming on and shedding this light on the abuse on just the group in general is so educational and informational and things that need to be told so that other people can be more aware, because without awareness, it's just going to keep going. And maybe there's someone watching this right now who's in the order realizing for the first time that what they've endured is also abuse and that they don't have to endure that anymore. And so I'm getting all choked up because I'm just so proud of you, Michelle.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to highlight, like, I never tried to shy away from that because I'm trying to put on this persona of like, oh, I'm this amazing person. Like, I'm human too. I've made mistakes, but I don't want to. Like I said, for a long time, I've struggled with the fact, like, do I tell this story and these bad things that I've done, or do I let them, hopefully maybe one day if they decide to leave, tell their own story and say, Michelle abused me, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want them to feel like I'm not taking accountability, but I also don't want to take their voice away. But there's abuse in forcing other people to abuse, like for me.
Yeah.
I know that part of the abuse that I suffered was being forced to abuse my siblings. And I hate the fact that I participated, but I also know that was all that I knew. That was what I felt was what needed to be done.
Yeah. And something that I wanted to bring up, because we've talked about how you were working at 4 years old, and I know education is a huge part of your story and how you got out, and really it's so inspirational, and I'm excited to get to that point. But first, I just have to ask, because I know you initially went to a private school, the Kingston run school, and then you were able to go to junior high and public school. Were any of these things noticed by the teachers? Was anyone commenting, asking if you were okay?
For the most part, they did pretty well about making sure the bruises and things could be covered. The biggest place was your backside. And they would even shame you even more or try to like humiliate you and say, I'm going to have you in our family meeting. I'm going to have you pull your pants down. I'm going to beat you in front of everybody. Most of them they were able to keep, I guess, under wraps. There were some times that they kind of slipped up, but they would just always have a story. Oh, I fell. Oh, I got hit by the swing set. And I'm like, I don't even play outside, but I'm telling people, oh, I got hit by a swing set. I don't even know, like, this sounds dumb, I guess, but I'm this kid. I don't even know if a swing set is able to make this mark because I don't play on swing sets. Yeah. I'm working all the time. I'm doing homework. But they did notice that we were very quiet and we stuck to our own, I guess. But there's quiet kids in school, so we got away with it.
Right. How were you able to go to school when you had these jobs?
When we went to the order school, sorry, I say we. I had a brother from the same mom. We were in the same grade because I skipped a grade. But so I say we, but when we were in the order school, there were times that if we didn't finish our work, we would work through the night and someone would pick us up from work, take us to the school, and we just wouldn't sleep that night. And then like in public school, when we would, I remember this time, we go to work right after school, and a big thing that I was always told was, home is not for homework. You get all your homework done at school, or you fail your class, and then you get to have a talk with dad, and you get beat. So it's up to you. And there were times that I would like not listen to my teacher and be working on homework for a different class because I was good at that subject. But I remember when I was at outside school or public school, then there was these kids they were like the other quiet kids, but they were like, oh, they're quiet. Let me go talk to them. And they found me odd. Quiet kids always kind of stick together. But here's this other quiet kid that wouldn't talk to them. And they would ask me like, what are you doing this weekend? What are you doing? And I would say, oh, I'm working. What are you doing after school today? And I said, oh, I'm working. And then after so many times, this kid said, how many hours do you work a week? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't like keep track. And they said, well, you told me 3 days in a row that you're working and you're working till 8. And you said this weekend you're working. That's illegal. And I was like, oh, no. No, I'm pretty sure it's fine. And they were like, no, that's illegal. And I was like, anyways. So that's actually how I learned that there were child labor laws.
Right.
Was from that kid. We worked into the night or whatever it took. We were working. They always said, and they told me even when I started college, because I still had the same rules. You have to be next to your brother at all times if you're on school property. If you want to go to the bathroom, your brother can follow you into the stall. Otherwise, you can wait till you get to work. That was what I was told. So And they told me, they said, if school is taking you away from your job, you will be ripped out. That was how we got our work done, was you can either have this career and keep going to school, or you can be pulled out of school because the job does not come second.
I want to point out that it was very unusual that you were given permission to go to public school and college. That was a really big deal.
Yes. So my older sister, she's 7 years older than me, but she went through Penn Foster, which is what the order kids did before they had the public private school that the order has now. And my mom's like, she doesn't know any of it. And my mom would ask her, like, what did you do today? What did you learn? And she's like, oh, everybody just sits in a room. They all follow the teacher's answer book, and we just fill out the answers. We don't learn any of it. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to my sister years after, and she's like looking at her transcript, and she's like, oh, I took Spanish. And I'm like, do you know any Spanish? And she's like, no, I didn't know I took Spanish. Oh. So she just didn't know that she even took it until looking at the transcript years later. So my mom said, well, obviously you're not learning anything. And because my dad's family were because they're more worthy, I guess. Like I said, my dad's kids, they don't leave. My dad's kids follow him down to the letter because of all the threats and all the abuse. But because his kids are seeing even if now, there's been order members who've told me Jesse's kids, they're stuck up, but if Jesse tells them to do something, they'll do it. They'll jump up and do it and run like they're scared. So to them and to Paul, then if Michelle is told, don't talk to anybody, she wouldn't dare to talk to somebody. She wouldn't dare to talk to the teacher. So, and then because of that, then I was allowed to go.
Okay.
So I think it's a little bit different now because I've left, but because my dad's kids were none of them are leaving. They're all following 100%. They're all 100% gung-ho for the order. Then I was kind of for the reputation, but also because my mom was she didn't learn anything. And then also my brother being in the same grade, that was another huge factor. My full brother, because I skipped a grade, then my mom's like, well, they can have every single class together. And he can watch her. And like I said, follow her into the bathroom if need. So that was another thing. So there were so many things coming together that just kind of allowed me to be able to go.
Mm-hmm. And you graduated high school really young.
Yeah. So me and my brother, we were in 9th grade. And 2 kids above me, he was in 11th grade. And he was taking these extra classes to graduate at the end of 11th grade, because a big thing they would say is don't waste your time on 12th grade because you only have a couple classes, a couple credits, just finish it in 11th grade. So then my mom said, and talked to my dad, well, they're going to have to do this anyways when they get to 11th grade. Why don't they start in 9th grade and start taking these extra classes now? And my dad's like, okay, that's fine. Let's do that. So then we did it. And so what ended up happening was I was doing the books, and then they were copying. My 2 brothers, older brothers, were copying the work. And I remember literally copying the books because I had to go take a test for that, and they weren't ready to fill out the answers on theirs. So then we did that, and then my mom's like, well, you guys did those in 2 weeks. We took all of our classes in 2 weeks. Then my mom's like, well, keep taking more and graduate at the end of 10th grade, which is what we ended up doing. So I graduated a month after I turned 15 with my high school diploma, going to public school.
How in the world were you able to function taking so many classes and working full time and living under the conditions that you were living? It just doesn't even compute. I don't understand how you were able to do that.
Well, and that's what, with the order. I had 3 jobs by the time I was 7, so I was good at managing my time, and everything has to be taken care of because the children were running the businesses. they couldn't function on just the adults running the businesses. Even Amanda was the one who had the cash. Different people, I was the one at Cardline. I was at Cardline, but I was also sorting out the check stubs for every month. I was good at managing time. And that's one thing, like even holding out help, they say that people who leave the order have a very strong work ethic because they are always have been managing so much on their plate, plus living through this abuse that they have to survive in.
So after you graduate high school, you're 15 years old, and then you go to college, and you still have to take the exact same classes as your brother in order for it to be approved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so when we were talking about college, then they were very, very iffy on if I could go. Because a lot of the other girls, they can't go unless they're married and they can ask their husband. Even my older sister, she couldn't go to college until either right before she got married or like around the same time. But she didn't go like when she first graduated high school. So they were very hesitant. Like I was playing the part perfectly. I was the good little girl. I was doing everything that my dad wanted. And again, there was so much that went into it. But my dad said, make a list of, I think it was 4 or 5. He said 4 or 5 possible degrees that you would like. So me and my brother did this. We showed it to him. So I know that math teacher was on it for me. I don't remember the other ones, but he said, well, you know, a lot of order people go for business, right? And I'm like, yeah. And he said, why don't you add that to your list? So I did. And then he was looking at them and he says, don't you think this one sounds stupid? And I was like, I guess. Like I didn't know why, but I guess it sounded stupid. So he's like, let's take this one off. So I crossed it off, give the paper back to him. And he's like, well, this one doesn't really make sense for you, right? It doesn't make sense for you to do that because my kid's like, for the teacher, he's like, our teachers don't go to school. This was before the high school that they have now. He's like, our teachers don't go to school. So that would be a waste of the order's money. So let's cross that one off. So I did. So slowly we got down to only business was left.
Who would have thought?
And he's like, that sounds really good. Yeah, I think business does fit for you. That's awesome. Yeah, let's do that. And then my brother's magically ended up with only business was left on his list. Mm-hmm. So then that's what we decided. Or he decided. And then we just went, and again, those were the rules. And there were times that I would get into an argument with my mom, or I would talk bad about my dad, and they would say, if you're going to keep talking like that, you're going to be pulled out of school. Do you see all these other people? They're not able to go to school and go to college. So if you want to keep talking like that and keep questioning your dad's actions, then you're going to be ripped out of school.
Well, you graduated. You graduated right before you turned 18?
I think it was 2 days after I turned 18.
Wow.
So I would have graduated before I turned 18, but so I had these classes signed up for the fall. So my dad, he has us do what's called a college packet, and we have to sign a college contract. My dad has contracts for everything. If you have a cell phone or an iPod, then your parents have to have access to it. You have to turn it in every single day, unless you're basically leaving. That's the only time you're allowed on it. And you have to get approval for everything. Your parents have to have all your passwords. Same thing with the car. But college, I can send you the college contract, but it says, I understand that I am going to school for the sole benefit of the order. I am not going to school to further my education. I am going to school to further the order's education. There's a lot of things on there, but we have to sign the college contract for us to go. And our dad has to sign it, and our mom has to sign it. So I had all this ready, filled out, approved. Classes were approved. Then I actually knew I was going to be leaving. So I didn't want them to know where I was because I have to turn in a copy of that entire packet into my dad. So if I left and still showed up to classes, we had to fill out the room number for those classes. So they would know exactly where I was. So I dropped all my classes after I left, then waited that semester and went back after I got emancipated. So I could have graduated before I turned 18, but yeah, if that makes sense.
Jeez, I'm over here like, wow, you graduated at 18. You're like, well, it could have been sooner. I'm like, dang, girl.
Well,
not that you're bragging. I'm bragging for you because I think it's amazing. Yeah. And we haven't even touched on, and I know this is also a huge part of your story, one of the reasons that you wanted to leave at 18 is because you were assigned a husband at 8 years old and you were pushing off the marriage, and you could no longer push it off anymore. And that's when you said, I got to get out of here. This is such a great story. And I know that we have so much more to go. So I'm actually going to have us end it there, but we are definitely going to pick this back up in a second part. So guys, definitely stay tuned for that. In the next part, we're going to be diving into her escape, what prompted her to want to leave the order, how she actually had to go about doing it, how she got emancipated, how she is doing now, of course, and all of the fun things that come with that. So if you want to support her, you can definitely leave some words of encouragement down below. It really helps us, helps the algorithm. If you want to reach out to her on Instagram, her Instagram is at mmichaels_35. We'll definitely leave all of the links below in the description for you if you want to get in touch. And another great resource for those who are wanting to volunteer, helping get people out of polygamy, or if you yourself are looking to escape polygamy, you can go to Holding Out Help, and I will also put that link in the description. They're a great resource for helping people who are trying to leave. Okay, so as promised, here are the details for our first ever C2C vacation. We were trying to brainstorm ways how we could connect with you guys, this amazing community that we've created, that you've created, and we were thinking it would be so fun if we could spend one-on-one time together in another part of the world in some sort of retreat like atmosphere. So we are looking into lots of different locations. Costa Rica is my top pick, but we actually want to see where you want to go, which is why if you want to be a part of this, you just go to our description. The link is there. It's a survey that you fill out where you can tell us where you want to go, what time of the year you want to go, how much you're okay with spending, and we're going to compile all of that information so that we have the best chance of creating the best retreat for you guys. So then in a couple of weeks, once we have all of that information down, we are going to announce where we're going to be going, and then you can sign up from there. There's probably going to be about 8 to 20 spots, so it'll be first come, first serve. So definitely fill out that link if you want to be the first to know about the vacation drop. If you want to support the podcast even further, again, liking and sharing and commenting is super awesome, but you can also purchase some of our merch over at cultstoconsciousness.com under the merch tab. We have Break the Silence, Break the Cycle. I'm sorry for what I said when I was in a cult. Lots of great things over there. Or if you want to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/cultstoconsciousness. That would mean the world if you could do that. Our newest patrons, Ino, Marita, Adam, and Patrick, thank you so much for your support. And if you guys like this video, I will link to right down here below that you can click. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious and be well.